Dystoria is quite a blast, and I mean that literally. It's sort of a mashup of assault rigs and Descent with a little bit of Tempest thrown in for good measure, and you'll spend your time flipping a little ship around laser-bright wireframe arenas, blasting space beetles, and collecting neon trinkets. Now, unlike Descent, your ship in Dystoria remains constantly affixed to a surface, but you can maneuver up, down, and pretty much around any surface you come across. The game's levels are quite maze-like, giving you plenty of gravity-defying opportunities to slide and dodge the many projectiles that enemies will send your way, and allowing the designers to hide upgrade parts and collectibles in lots of hidden nooks and crannies. Dystoria presents a nice little adhesive twist that sits comfortably between single-plane shoot-em-ups and 6 Degrees of Freedom blasters, and most of the levels in the game task you with locating 3 orbs to open an exit port. It's a formula that works, with the game throwing in enemies to distract you and provide a little opposition. Ship parts required to upgrade and unlock new vessels are nestled in secret corners, and later on, larger levels have you unlocking new paths and areas to track down the aforementioned orbs. Dystoria is at its best when it allows you to kind of play it as an exploratory puzzler. It could maybe do with a few more objectives, but once you wrap your head around the map, it becomes a nice little collect-em-up, especially when the levels become more complex and you have to use your brain a little more to get from one area to the next. When it comes to combat though, Dystoria begins to lose its shine. Playing with a controller or keyboard or mouse, I found ships to be a little too slippy and not quite as responsive as I'd hoped. The camera aggressively shifts as soon as you flip your ship, which can be a little jerky and momentarily disorienting, and that's not good when certain enemies have the capacity to do serious damage with a single shot. Ultimately, during nearly every combat encounter, I kind of found myself wishing Dystoria was actually a regular 6 Degrees of Freedom game. It doesn't really help that some enemies float overhead and you can't adjust your aim on a vertical axis to compensate, or that a handful of levels are actually combat dependent and force you to eliminate every last enemy. The other major issue is that there are actually only a handful of enemy variants in the game to begin with, and a noticeable paucity of marquee showdowns, and although there's a pretty enjoyable boss right at the end, Dystoria is a game crying out for more set pieces to break up the levels. Despite the increasing level complexity, there's little difference in what you're actually doing as you progress, and it would have been nice to have a few more boss battles to shake things up a bit. That being said, if you simply take the game as it is, Dystoria does present a solid little retro package for arcade fans. The game loop works well, you'll play through levels, unlock better ships and weapons, and return to take care of optional objectives in quicker times and increase your score. There's no direct multiplayer, but there is some fun to be had with trying to best one another on the level leaderboards. Now, to be fair, the throwback presentation is excellent, especially the soundtrack, which is all 80s synths and retro electronica. The weapon effects and environmental sound work are similarly superb, with enemies often revealing themselves through idiosyncratic bleeps, drones and whirs before you can even see them. And combined with the simple, elegant wireframe approach to visual design, it's clear that Tri-Coastal are really gunning for an audience that remembers Tron rather fondly. This is packaged nostalgia through and through, and although not particularly imaginative, it's certainly very effective. Less effective is the plot that tries to sneak its way into proceedings. There's an awkward intro sequence that's basically cribbed from the last Starfighter, and the game tries to give you some context for why everything is happening, but to be honest, it really doesn't need to. It's half-baked and rather detrimental, to be honest. Now, not all games need story, but if you're going to put it in, at least make it good, or just leave it out. Now, thankfully, in this game you can pretty much ignore it completely and just get back to farming glowing orbs and blasting space bugs, which is fine. In all honesty, I hope Tri-Coastal make a sequel. There's lots to like here, especially if you fancy taking a trip down Nostalgia Avenue, but there's also lots to improve upon. Better handling, more varied enemies, improved camera work, and multiplayer shootouts would really elevate Dystoria significantly. What is here, however, is still worth a look if you fancy a perspective-shifting, gravity-defying, pick-up-and-play action throwback. So to sum up, Dystoria is a well-presented, nostalgic blend of a range of influences, and its mind-bending premise does make for an entertaining sci-fi action puzzler, but it is let down somewhat by uninspired enemy design and a lack of variety. Solid enough to warrant a look then, but probably not a game that's going to really stick in the memory for very long.